And I think we'll begin. Let's begin the recording, Arjun. I'd like to start by speaking about attention. Attention is a very curious thing. You pay attention to listen to me now. It's invisible, right? There's no red light that turns on in your forehead to let me know that you're paying attention. But at the same time, it's definitely something real. If you stop paying attention, you miss the meaning of what I say. I may or may not notice it, but you do, you know, afterwards, of course, that you missed a whole chunk. You were not paying attention. So attention is not a fantasy. It's some real quality, but invisible. And so one way we relate to it is that we call it an energy, which is, I suppose, adequate. Yes, it's an energy. It's a force. It's real, but it's not physical. So I don't necessarily see when it's there or when it's absent, but it's definitely real. We will be studying attention today from various points of view, and also seeing how older teachings, usually visual teachings, portray attention and what we can learn from their understandings. This is a set of 6 tapestries, mystical tapestries. They're in Paris now, in the museum. They're called the Tapestries of the Lady and the Unicorn for obvious reasons. There is a lady and a unicorn in each of them. And 5 of them represent the 5 senses, bringing us back to attention. Because to pay attention, I direct that invisible energy I mentioned at the beginning through one of the 5 senses, don't I? You have to use the sense of hearing to pay attention to what I say. And of course, to a large extent, you also use the sense of sight to see me and what I show in the workshop. But had you not had those 2 senses, those 2 windows, even if you wanted to pay attention, you couldn't. So attention is not the senses, but it relies on these windows through which to flow, let's say. This tapestry represents the sense of sight. The lady is showing the unicorn itself in a mirror, therefore, implying vision, implying sight. This one is implying taste. She's eating, she's being served a dish of something and eating from it. We can pay attention to what we eat through the sense of taste or what we drink. This one is implying the sense of hearing through music, the sense of touch, and the sense of smell. She's stringing a garland of flowers. We can assume that the flowers are fragrant. By the way, the reason the lady is shown with a unicorn, the medieval legends have it that unicorns were vicious animals and would destroy human beings unless they were virgins. And so the implication here is that this lady is a virgin. A very Christian idea, isn't it? Although she's not Mary. This is important for us because we will use the symbol of the lady. Notice it's featured on each of these senses. So there is some relation, there is some symbolic relation between the feminine and attention, the feminine and the senses, regardless of gender. Yes, this would apply to men and women alike. There is some symbolism here we have to understand. Keep this in mind, and let's examine it on another medieval image, also mystical. And by saying mystical, I mean not obviously connected to religion. Yes, this is not an obviously Christian religion, even though it comes from an environment in which, and a time in which Christianity predominated. But this is not a Christian image, neither were the tapestries. And here we have a woman again, before I'll be asking you to tell me what you see with her, but before that, here's an interesting experiment. Now you are paying attention to what I'm saying through the sense of hearing and the sense of sight. I want you to not pay attention to me. Can you do that? Carlos, can you do that? Can you stop paying attention to me? It's very difficult, isn't it? Ilya. Actually, how can you do that, Jeremy? Can you stop paying attention to me, please? The only way I can think of is by paying attention to something else, right? Right, exactly. So, right, Jeremy, closing your ears, obviously, you could close your eyes. That would do it. That's a good point, Jeremy. Closing those windows of the senses. Or if not, then by deliberately paying attention to something else. If there is some other audio or visual, and you look and listen to it, then obviously you won't be paying attention to me. But my point is that inattention, inattentiveness, which is what this mysterious wheel of the mind, as some call it, is portraying, is not under your will. When it happens internally, it happens, but you cannot will it to happen. None of us can zone out and daydream by will. It happens to us much more than we want, we'll all admit, but never because we want it. Yes, this is very interesting and very indicative, instructive of something. So here we have a woman again, the feminine again, in a very different attitude, let's say, than the lady in the tapestries. How would you read this? What's happening here? Kelly, now that we know a little bit about the symbolic significance of the lady and that it has to do with attention in the senses, what would you say is happening here?
And I think I've thought about this painting before, and I always think of that if she's not paying attention, that her hair is going to get caught in the wheel, and then that will wake her up. But it's just like she's by having that hair in front of her face, that's just that extra less lack of another impression. You know, she's not, so whether she's doing it on purpose or not, that her hair and her face is just blocking her vision from paying attention or seeing what's going on.
Yes, very good. A good place to start. Her hair, because it's obviously, it's almost disturbingly, I mean, this is not a natural thing, isn't it? You don't see women walking around with their hair over their faces in this way. It's unnatural, and therefore it catches our attention. By the way, in other communities, which I featured this in the past days, somebody also pointed out that the donkey also seems to have its hair on its face. I never made that connection. But yes, so we have a double problem here. Both of them are not there, are not attending, and there are certain consequences. Okay, we have a good start. What other observations can any of you offer?
That's off.
Yes.
It looks like she's trying, though. You know what I mean? Like her body's pointing back towards what it is she's trying to lead, even though she can't quite see yet. It looks like she's kind of efforting toward it. And then also it does kind of look like the blind leading the blind because of both the donkey and the lady not seeing, but it looks like she's trying, kind of.
Okay. She's lifting her dress. This is true. She's leaning towards the wheel. In one, actually, in the Russian community, Alina pointed out, I think it was you, Alina, I may be wrong, ever so slightly, she may be smiling, Jeremy. In other words, this is pleasant. Yes? Imagine, Spensky said, imagination satisfies all centers. Ah, yes, that time when I traveled, you know, in the Mediterranean. Yes, it's pleasant, obviously. And that's a problem, because if it's pleasant, then, as you said, Kelly, it's going to take her hair getting stuck in the wheel and getting jerked before anything can wake her up, because she's not going to wake herself up if it's a pleasant sleep. Other observations? You see, before you add, there's a lot to add. But a teaching like this, as you see, is symbolic. So it's not in words. We don't have an accompanying paragraph here to explain to us why this is portrayed the way it is and what it implies. But that does not mean that the intent of the authors of this image was not as specific and instructive as our intent is today. So we're simply less used to the language of symbolism and imagery in this age, in the 21st century, which is a heavily literary and intellectual age. And so we're practicing our ability to speak a different language now, all of us, the language of symbolism. Other observations? Gerald.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I walk my dog every day, and this painting makes me think that often when I'm leading my dog on a leash, and she has stopped to smell something, and I get the feeling here that she's leading the donkey, and the donkey wasn't following, so she turned around to see why.
Very sweet. And comes from direct experience, it sounds like, Gerald.
Yes, it does.
Donkey, another symbol foreign to most of us, probably all of us, because we do not live in times where you have a donkey in the backyard helping you with the chores of the garden, right? We have cars, tractors, if we're farmers. But a donkey, which was, of course, a typical beast of burden, still is in many of these countries, is an incredibly stubborn creature, much more than your dog, Gerald. I assure you that. Just the psychology of a donkey. I once saw, we were climbing up Palitana. Arjun, have you ever been to Palitana? You know where it is though, right?
No, actually, not heard of it.
It's probably because it's from it's a Sikh, it's kind of the Sikh Mecca, at least from what I was told. And we were climbing up, it's a tall mountain, you climb up many, many stairs on foot. And I saw a woman leading up donkeys. I guess they were bringing provisions to the temple and to the people of the temple up above. And she basically had to prod them every 2 steps. Now we're speaking of hundreds of steps, yes? They never got it that if they stop after 2 steps, they get whacked in the bottom. And they just kept stopping. And they take 2 steps and they'd stop, and another 2 steps and they'd stop. And she just kept prodding their hinds, their behinds. Incredibly stubborn and willful. And I believe, Gerald, that it is for this reason that a donkey is placed at the center of the wheel. It seems like the woman has the ability, she has the reins, if she wanted to control the donkey, but it won't be easy. And definitely, if she slackens the reins as she has, he's going to do what he wants and not follow her will.
Yes.
Other observations? You can just unmute yourselves. Don't raise your hands because I may not see you.
Asaf, it's
Yes.
Hannah.
Yes.
Well, relating it to what you said in your introduction, the actual eye of this being, of this psyche, is looking outwards. Obviously, eyes have to. But if the woman is maybe attention, this whole being is not looking with attention. So he or she is probably going around doing things automatically. Meanwhile, her attention is on her imagination, this little wheel of imaginings that's going around in the background of her head.
Very important observation, Hannah. We do have 3 of the 5 senses very strongly represented here. We have an eye, yes, in this orb, it's open. We have a nose, sense of smell, and we have a mouth, the sense of taste. And yet, if the woman, as you say, Hannah, if we define the woman, the symbol of the woman as attention, then it's misplaced. It's not flowing through these senses, but lost somewhere in the mind. So literally, by that interpretation, this is a portrait of inattention. The thing is that inattention has consequences. So you think, let's go back to the example, that in this workshop, if you were inattentive so far, you might have missed something that I said, and that's a loss. Yes. Well, I'll catch up. I'll review the recording, right, and I can catch up. So it's a minor loss. You think. The problem with inattention, according to this portrait, is that a lot happens in the background that has consequences. Again, borrowing from older sources, now we're in Spain. A few centuries later, this is a very interesting Spanish playwright called Pedro Calderón de la Barca, who wrote a play called Life is a Dream, which actually is a play of interest, and it would be worthwhile performing sometime in the right occasion for us. It's a bit Shakespearean. Actually, he's a contemporary of Shakespeare. Not that necessarily they knew each other and influenced each other, but in this play, if I recall correctly, one of the lead roles is placed in a position in which, when he wakes up, he actually doesn't know whether he's dreaming or whether it actually is happening. So there's a kind of a double meaning in the title, and that same character later on, I think he's imprisoned, and he goes out with this speech, with a soliloquy, as they call it, and he says, "We live while we see the sun, where life and dreams are as one. And living has taught me this: man dreams the life that is his, until his living is done." The speech is longer. I will include it. Actually, Arjun, I have to ask you to include it when we publish the video of this on the channel. Man dreams the life that is his, as you said, Hannah. And although you may be seated and looking at somebody, you actually do not see them. You have already a predetermined image of them. Hello, Tamara. Nice to see you, by the way. I'm happy you made it. Tamara, this is very much related to your challenge that you mentioned, because in relations with people, the better we know them, so like close friends and family, the more we bring this predetermined imaginary construct we have of them, and we no longer see Arjun and Andrash and Susanna and Naile. And so it's very hard for us to change our relationship to them and even see them, even feel them. We follow, it kind of guarantees that we follow our habitual interaction with them. One of the most difficult things to change is our relation to other people, especially people close to us. And it can only begin through paying attention. Another related thought from George Gurdjieff. There is no attention in people, he says. You must aim to acquire this. Self-observation is only possible after acquiring attention. Start on small things. Attention is a muscle we can train. The more we train Our Lady to turn to the right, because that's what it seems necessary, doesn't it? If she just turned to her right, that turning would pull the reins on the donkey, discipline the wheel, and of course, position her to look through the eyes and perhaps smell through the nose and taste through the mouth, which she's not doing right now. But the more she does this turn, the more she pays attention, the better she will be able to repeat it. And the same for us. The more we learn to pay attention, the more attention we have available for self-observation. And as we will see towards the end of today's workshop, self-observation is actually a very interesting application of attention. Because which sense? So self-observation is directing the attention inward, isn't it? Being aware of myself now as I speak. Which sense am I using? Right? I have 5 windows. Which window am I directing my attention to? Well, it's none of the five, isn't it? It's the sixth window. It's the sixth sense. That's where the the so-called sixth sense came from. And there is actually a sixth tapestry in this series that has to do with that. But we're jumping ahead a little bit here. Let's see a contrasting image, also one that includes a woman. We're looking at this woman up here now. Don't let the dragon attract your attention. Look at the woman here, yes? This woman actually is more directly related to Christian imagery. It's a vision from the book of Revelations. This is the verse that it is illustrating. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. If formerly our woman was locked in the moon and the sun, as a kind of a sliver here, was hinted at the background, ignored, disregarded, then here we have a reversal. This woman is treading upon the moon, it's under her feet, and she is in the sun, clothed with the sun. There has been a reversal. And appropriately, look how wide open her eyes are, how attentive she is, almost in an exaggerated way. So we see portraits of attentiveness and inattentiveness using the same symbolism, medieval symbolism in Europe. Gurdjieff says, learn to think consciously. This produces economy in the expenditure of energy. Don't dream. So there are consequences to dreaming. Yes, daydreaming, dreaming being daydreaming. It wastes energy. It builds up imaginary picture. Reinforces it, as Hannah says. And it's a waste of an opportunity of strengthening the muscle of attention, a muscle we desperately need, those of us involved in this type of work, in self-study and self-observation. Christian, let's conclude the broadcast.